Hey guys, Scott Stewart here. So this video is intended for my friends and followers out there who are involved in the marching arts activity, specifically those who have an interest in the drum corps activity. And obviously we all know probably by now that a new ruling has come out on the DCI Congress that actually allows for some, at least some, woodwind usage. And that is, of course, a big monumental moment for the activity. And a lot of opinions are going to be had about this. A lot of emotions are going to be pulled and tugged. Though I got to say, to a certain degree, I'm kind of surprised as I scan the different groups and stuff online. I'm kind of surprised that there's not as much talk about this as there already is. Now, maybe I'm just not looking in the right places, but places like Facebook Drum and Bugle Corps and other groups like that, I'm just not really seeing a whole lot of chatter about it, which is kind of surprised because I figured this would be one of those moments where there would be a big meltdown among old fans and the newer fans coming in and the newer members coming in and saying, that they support it and that sort of thing. Obviously, I've got my opinions on it, and I've had a few people ask me what those opinions are, and I really haven't posted much about it myself. But I figured rather than writing out or typing out a long post giving my feedback and my position on it, I figured it might make better sense to record a video so you could kind of get an idea. Sometimes when you're posting stuff online, writing stuff online, you can't detect body language. You can't really sense what a person is feeling when they explain things. So I figured this might give you a better idea of where I stand. So let's first of all talk about what the ruling actually says. Now, I don't have it written down in front of me, but to paraphrase what I know the rule states, you can use one instrument of any type. It doesn't have to just be woodwinds. It could be strings. It could be pretty much anything else. But there is now an allowance for an instrument of any type. I believe it's one instrument, maybe, and probably one instrument performer, one performer on that instrument that is allowed to be used throughout the show, throughout a drum corps show, which obviously means that if somebody wants to pull out a saxophone and be a featured jazz saxophone players, in a show, that they can now do that a corps can now do that. Some of the corps out there that are known for jazz, Blue Devils, Blue Coats even, and some of the others out there may find a really good opportunity to use a saxophone soloist, a really good jazz saxophone soloist. You might see a clarinet solo out there. You might see a flute solo. And it does say, I think the wording says something to the effect of for the remainder of the show. So what does that mean? The first thing that it means is that you're not going to see full sections out there. That's not going to take place, at least not between now and the next Rules Congress. A lot of people have said, oh, just wait another year. And it's like, well, I don't know when the next Rules Congress is, but it's not going to nothing more than this is going to get pushed through until the next Rules Congress. So you're not going to see a full flute section out there. You're not going to see a full saxophone section. You're not going to see a full woodwind section out there. You're not going to see a full string section. What you're going to see is corps, and probably not even every corps, utilizing a different soloist, maybe a flute soloist, a violin soloist, a clarinet soloist, again, like I said in the beginning, a saxophone soloist. So how do I personally feel about that? Well, let me give you a little bit of a parallel. Now, I'm a musician. I've been a musician my entire life, and I play in orchestras, I play in big bands, I play in wind ensembles, play in smaller ensembles. I played professionally most of my adult life. At times it was full time, and right now it's part time. And I sort of look at this similar to, you have a wind ensemble and you have an orchestra, concert band, orchestra. both groups, both types of ensembles tend to do the same kind of music. They have very similar characteristics. But there's a major difference between the two of them. One of them is strictly winds and percussion, woodwinds, brass, and percussion. And then that's your wind ensemble, your concert band, as they're sometimes called, symphonic bands, different terminologies that you use for this, but it's all the same thing. And then you've got orchestras, symphony orchestras, full-blown symphony orchestras, which have strings, brass, woodwinds, percussion, and sometimes among other things as well. So, for me personally, I love both. I would never want to see a day where one ceases to exist for another. I like the characteristic of sound that I hear with a wind ensemble. It's unique. Even though it's similar to what an orchestra does, it's unique. I also really like what an orchestra sounds like with a full string section. Again, it has its own uniqueness. Drum corps and marching band kind of the same way. You've got brass and percussion with drum corps. You've got woodwinds, brass and percussion, and pretty much anything else with a marching band. And both kind of do the same type of thing, but they have their own characteristic sounds that come from one having a certain core of instruments and the other having a much larger and a much wider core of instruments. So, do you ever see a wind ensemble utilize a violin soloist? Absolutely. Do you ever see a wind ensemble utilize a string bass, a double bass? Absolutely, all the time. In fact, I'd say in most cases that's a standard. You have at least one upright bass, you have one double bass in pretty much most top wind ensembles that are out there. Now, it doesn't, when you use those instruments, isolated versions of those instruments, a soloist, a violin soloist, a viola soloist, a double bass, a harpist, when you use those string instruments, it doesn't take away from the core instrumentation of a wind ensemble. It's still a wind ensemble. The core instrumentation is still woodwinds, brass, and percussion. So you wouldn't call it a symphony orchestra. You wouldn't say, "Oh, that's not a wind ensemble. That's a symphony orchestra." No, it's a wind ensemble. It's a symphonic band. It's not. There's not a full string section out there. So with this new ruling with drum corps, I kind of see it the same way. The core instrumentation is still brass and percussion. But now they're allowing for you to utilize a flute soloist, a saxophone soloist, a clarinet soloist, and even a string soloist, if you wanted to do that. In that context, I personally don't really have a problem with it. To me, it doesn't take away from the uniqueness of the drum corps activity. It doesn't take away from the uniqueness of a full marching band, which I think that's also very important too. I think there's something very unique when you see a great band program like Avon High School or Broken Arrow or Carmel, and then of course all those bands that are out there in Texas are absolutely phenomenal, and there's bands in Ohio and Tennessee and Kentucky and California that are just phenomenal, and a lot of them have their own local circuits that are phenomenal. You've got UIL down in Texas. You've got Indiana's got a circuit. I think you got two circuits in California: WBA, SESBOA. Tennessee's got TBA, and of course the Contest of Champions, which is a very old, historic sort of a regional championship for the Southeast. And those groups that compete at that level, at that top caliber level, have their own uniqueness to them that I wouldn't want to see the DCI activity pull from too much, because I like what they do over here and I like what the drum corps activity does over here. So with this current new ruling, I don't see any of that compromise personally. That's just me personally. Some of you might disagree. A lot of you probably agree as well. But that's just how I kind of see it. I don't see the uniqueness being lost at this point. So that's where I'm at with it. That's how I see it. Not sure how you see it. I certainly welcome your feedback. Feel free to leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think of this. Let me know how, if some of the things that I've described for you here today, or presented here for you today, maybe change your opinion. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. That's fine. Either way, that's where I stand on it, and I'd love to hear how some of the rest of you stand.